Hey, what's going on, guys? Fizz here once again. I have a few things to get out of the way at the beginning of this video. This will be a video covering my Leaguestarter. However, I want to go over a private league that I'm starting at the beginning of this league. If you don't care, timestamps are down in the description. Skip around to your heart's content. I'm going to try to keep this video very short and concise because I'm very sick right now. However, Leaguestarter waits for no man, so I need to record this now. So basically, there's Hardcore WoW around the corner coming out. Dark and Darker is in early access. There's a lot of other games that I'm enjoying right now. And I found personally 322 to be quite lackluster due to, once again, no balance changes. I feel like I don't really need to beat this horse any more than it already is. I was one of the first people to be vocal about like stagnant meta and a lack of balance changes and new additions to the game a very long time ago, and that sentiment has only grown from the player base over time. Obviously my views on it haven't changed. However, I decided to do something completely new this league because I don't know how much of 322 I will be playing. This is obviously subject to change. However, this will be my first time starting softcore. I've never really played softcore in PoE before. I pretty much started straight in a hardcore, and I've played that ever since like HCSSF. So this will be my first time experiencing software. Can't guarantee I won't get bored and dock leave really fast. However, I am starting a Merry Fizmas. If you guys are familiar with past Fizmas private leagues, it's the same thing. There's no build ban list this time around. This is basically just to have fun with my community. If you guys want to join, there will be a link down in the description below. You do need to join my Discord in order to join the private league, just to filter out people who you know, like request join the private league and then never actually play. That's just to filter those people out. So just join the Discord and you can join the private league, no problem. There is a tab in the Discord as well that goes over the rules. Some of these rules will apply this time and some of them won't, like using banned skills and stuff. There is no ban list this time around. I'll delete this, but there's no ban list this time around, so don't worry about it. This is just basically a economy free private league. It's just a group found. Currently we are fully funded and we have 60 a cap of 60 players. If this approaches cap, I will just add more. That's fine. I just didn't know how to gauge player interest, and this, I haven't actually announced this anywhere really. There's just been talked about in my Discord. So if you guys want to, you know, come play with me, experience Leaguestarter in a different way, feel free. There's more info in my Discord if you're interested. I just want to be super short. So what am I league starting? Well, I am league starting Intuitive Link, Frigid Bond, Cold Dot Guardian. Now, don't dock leave, okay? Don't dock leave. I can explain myself. I figured if I'm going to be doing Fun Core for the first time ever, I might as well really embrace the spirit. So I started out kind of messing around with some POB shenanigans here, and then as it turned out, the build actually looks very, very strong, and there are a few assumptions being made on the way that things will work with the build. However, I can more or less guarantee that this should be incredibly smooth on Leaguestarter for a few reasons that I will get into. However, I have multiple contingency plans and backup strategies if certain assumptions don't work, you know, don't end up being true. However, I'm not very concerned about this. This will be a more which one of these works best, and not will this work at all. So while this may seem a little suspect on paper, especially given the community sentiment about certain things like minion survivability and link skills, I'm not too worried. I think I have a really solid game plan here and a really solid strategy, and as always, you guys know me, I'm willing to make myself the guinea pig to prove my point. Well, basically, the new minions, I wanted to use them in some way. I know a lot of people have been dogging on them. However, Frigid Bond is effectively the equivalent of like a level 25 Cold Snap or something. The base damage on Frigid Bond support, which can only support link skills, is very high. It's incredibly high. We don't know how qualities will interact with this yet, etc. And what a level 21 Frigid Bond would look like, so I just went with the bare minimum. And Frigid Bond, I just assumed the level 20 with the gym info that we had. So that was kind of the point of the build, is to use Frigid Bond more or less. So obviously pairing Frigid Bond, you need to sort out a few things. You need to be linked to something. If you're playing solo, which I plan to be playing solo pretty much all the time, you need to link to something. So Guardian actually has synergy, the new Guardian, with link skills and Radiant Crusade, which summons a Sentinel of Radiance. So I'm going to go into my assumptions on how the build will work first. Sorry, I'm in a Discord channel. What I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go into my assumptions about how the build will work first, and then we'll walk backwards from there, and we'll go over how things will work if it doesn't. But I would say there are at least two big assumptions I'm making with this build. The first assumption is that the minion will survive. All right, so I've heard a lot of doom and gloom over minion survivability lately. So I have emulated the life of my minions here by just using a Animate Guardian. So the Aura minions are equivalent to a level 29 Animate Guardian, and the Sentinel of Radiance is the equivalent of a level 25 Animate Guardian, just by matching the base health here. So all the increases to his life will be via the tree. So the first assumption is that the minion can survive. And why do I think the minion can survive? Well, the minion will have 90% all res due to the Guardian skill with link skills. So whenever you're linked to a target, they have +5 max res. There's other stuff you can get on the tree that increases minion max res here, as well as this minion defense mastery. That's another 8%. So the minion will have 90% max res. The minion will have, or close to it, I believe, at least 85%. I believe you can get more though. I've changed around a few things, but for the sake of argument, at least 85% all res. It will be immune to bleed, and it will be fully ailment immune because we are running purity of elements. So this should remove all types of shenanigans regarding like greed essences, throwing corrupting blood. I don't actually know if this node works with corrupting blood or not. That's something I'm gonna have to find out. That's why it's an assumption. This is probably something I could find out if I googled it, but it wouldn't deter me from playing the build anyway. So making the build completely ailment immune, or the pet completely ailment immune, making them bleed immune, capping out their resistances, and then giving them absolutely tons of life regen, as much as I can get. Now, if survivability does become an issue, there's more minion survivability that I can grab on the tree. There's a lot of extra regen nodes here. These might be optimal to take at some point. Basically, this comes down to culling out a little bit of damage to fit in more minion survivability if that becomes an issue. There is also the minion life medium cluster jewel. You're situated here perfectly to add in a medium cluster jewel with minion life that gives them a bunch of max life regen, and life recovery if a minion has died recently. There's also grave intentions here for 20% of max life is extra maximum ES and a ton of chaos res. And then you can take minions recover 5% of life on minion death. This paired with the cluster jewel node will be 9%, and you have per minion death, you have Unwavering Crusade, which gives you 3 aura minions that have a 5-second base duration that will be expiring all the time. Even if you're just moving between packs, you have a 25% to summon one of these things anytime you or an ally kills something, which means that these are going to be up while you're clearing 100% of the time, no problem. But between packs, or if you don't kill something for a few seconds, they're all going to time off. They're going to time out. It's going to be bam, 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 boom. That's almost 30% of your Guardian's life replenished immediately, just flat. So we pair that with a bunch of life regen. I'm also running Vitality. You keep Convocation up for extra life regen and additional clear speed. And yeah, that's basically the assumption being made there, that the minion will survive. Now, if the minion cannot survive, there is a additional alternative, and it's fitting an Animate Guardian in the build. Now, I would say the number one thing with this build, it actually has a lot more scalability. The issue that you run into with this build and where it is bottlenecked is actually gym sockets. I'm running a double unset ring setup right now, and I am just barely squeaking by, and I had to make some sacrifices with gym sockets. So this is definitely the hardest part of the build. However, currently I'm running a 6-link Vortex and Cold Snap in my chest piece, and in a pseudo 5-link gloves, I'm running Intuitive Link. So in my gloves, I'm running Intuitive Link with Creeping Frost, Frigid Bond Support, and Bone Chill. Now, if And then the gloves themselves are Delirium gloves, so 30% more damage for socketed gems, which would apply to Frigid Bond, because any socketed gems, not skill gems. So that would benefit Frigid Bond. So if the Sentinel of Radiance still cannot live, what you would do is take Intuitive Link and put that in a Hungry Loop. You would drop Creeping Frost, which would be a slight DPS loss. So if we look here and compare Creeping Frost to something like Hypothermia, it's like a 4% damage difference exactly. So you would lose a very marginal amount of damage by doing this. However, it would solve the issue. So you basically just drop Creeping Frost, throw Intuitive Link in your Hungry Loop, and instead of, because, you know, Hungry Loop can't eat skill gems, you'd use Controlled Destruction instead. Bam. That would be your solution. And then, with your new pair of gloves that now are open free sockets, you would put your Animate Guardian setup in there. And you would fit an Animate Guardian into the build with Meat Shield support, Meat Shield support and like Elemental Army and Minion Life, and there's more things you can scale that way. And then also being able to like obviously give gear to an Animate Guardian with Alt Qual Animate Guardian that just straight up gives it 40% increased life. You would run that instead, and you take a 4% DPS loss almost to the number to be able to guarantee at that point that there won't be any shenanigans with the minion dying. So that is the first backup strat. There's a lot of different ways around it depending on how if it is, I'm not saying it will die, but if it ends up dying, if I end up struggling with minion survivability, all the different avenues I have to fix it at, you know, varying degrees of severity. Now the second assumption that I'm making with the build is that the Sentinel will attack. So if you guys don't know what Intuitive Link does, Intuitive Link links a target, and anytime they attack, they will trigger any socketed support gems. Now, I did test this myself in Standard. So if you link, all I did was link an Animate Guardian. You can link Creeping Frost, Cold Snap, Frostbolt, whatever. You can link a bunch of skills, and then when they swing, they'll proc all of them. So Intuitive Link has a half-second internal cooldown, but it will trigger all spells linked to it with hit. So basically, Creeping Frost, Cold Snap is not actually being triggered. It's just, like I said, simulating Frigid Bond support. So, that's why Intuitive Link. So we can proc Creeping Frost and then be able to benefit from Bone Chill here in this setup. That's kind of how Intuitive Link works, and that's why I'm using Intuitive Link. So there's like a lot of different avenues here of vectors that damage is being applied, and I haven't even covered them yet, but I'll get there in a second. But the assumption is that the monster, the Sentinel, excuse me, is attacking, whether it's via auto attack. Sounds bugging out on this song. Let me skip it. So, I don't know if the Sentinel will have its own special attack animation, or if it will have an auto attack, or if it just floats there and doesn't attack at all. Now, if it does not attack at all, just like with before, throwing this in a Hungry Loop setup would probably be a good backup strat as well, and dropping Cold Snap. And then also, you can just drop Intuitive Link if you want, and then just use any random link. At that point, none of the links actually do anything except for Intuitive Link, which is why I'm using it. And at that point, it doesn't really matter. Just use whatever link you feel like using, and drop Creeping Frost and use a full support. So those are the two assumptions being made on the build, and neither of them completely make or break the build, because there are very solid backup strategies and contingency plans to sort it out if that happens to be the case. So what is the build actually? So effectively, the build is a cold dot build that also abuses Link, the new Link support, Frigid Bond. I don't know if I have it up here. This one. Frigid Bond support. So you notice a base cold damage per second of 3,600. The damage and chill linger for 2 seconds. This would be affected by skill effectuation, obviously. Modifiers to spell damage also apply to the damage over time, and it has increased effective chill. This is really, really strong, honestly. The obvious drawback between this, the obvious drawback here is that it's a support gem, so it will be a lot harder to scale the damage relative to like a skill gem. Things like +1 to cold skill gems is not gonna, increase the gem level of this. However, that's why we're supplementing it with normal cold dot. But it doesn't really stop there. Basically, I'll break it down to you like this. We have our Sentinel of Radiance, right? Well, we have him linked with Intuitive Link. So every time he hits, he will use Creeping Frost. There will be a link between me and him. Me and them, I guess. And everything between it will automatically get clotheslined for a dot that lingers. They don't need to stay in the link. If they just like shield charge through, everything is eating that dot. So then we have that as well. And then we have Vortex on our left click, as you have with a typical cold dot build. And we have Cold Snap for our filler spell to spam, because you're not actually using any spells, right? Vortex automatically casts on left click. The link is just a buff. It's like having Divine Blessing up, and then you have Vol Cold Snap for cooldowns. Now, that's most of the damage vectors. However, there's one additional source of scaling, and that is our Sentinel of Radiance. You're like, Fizz, why do you have 3 level 40 Scorching Rays here? And I'll show you here. They're all set to 1 state, right? And that's because the base fired damage over time of a level 40 Scorching Ray is 4,500. So 3 of these is about like 13.5k or something. If we take 30% of our Sentinel of Radiance life, which is what this is, our Sentinel of Radiance will burn in a radius of 30, which is quite large, enemies for 30% of its maximum life per second. And this is where the crux of the build really comes in. The amount that this damage is burning for is, like, depending on how much you spec into minion life and whatnot, 350 to 450k, assuming that they are within your link skill, and I'll go over what that means in a second. That is basically like you having a pocket RF jug walking around with you all the time. That's a lot of damage. That is a lot of damage. You can comfortably clear T16 maps with a 300k RF, no problem. And this is more damage than that. This monster will jump around, zoom around by himself, and just completely take out packs. This, by the way, is why I decided to league start this build. No matter how, like, if there ends up being jank with minion survivability or something in the extreme end game, for a league start scenario, you will literally do first lab and have this absolutely crackhead minion just walking around with a giant radius RF through the entire campaign that will just instantly kill everything. It should be incredibly smooth, and it scales. Here's the important part. It scales with player level, not with gym sockets or with gear. So while yes, at the very top end, that means that scaling is limited, it will have a ceiling, but that also means that it will have a very, very satisfying and smooth progression curve, because you just level up and then they get stronger. It really is that simple. It means it doesn't matter if you get bad RNG on an early 5 link or whatever, it doesn't matter. This minion will be able to carry you really well. So the minion should have no issues there. So that's another additional source of damage. And now we get into the way that the build is being scaled. So I scale generic elemental damage, a little bit of area damage, and then a lot of minion damage, because with Spiritual Aid, any increases and reductions to minion damage also affect me. That means I can increase the damage of my Sentinel of Radiance AoE burn by also increasing my own damage. And I can increase the survivability at the same time, because a lot of these nodes that give minion damage also give minion life. Like, a lot of these scale the minion survivability, but they also scale his damage. So they're not completely wasted nodes. And the really cool thing here, enemies near my link target are exposed to fire, cold, and lightning all at the same time. So it completely takes care of exposure for us, and we don't have to worry about focusing one damage source over another. That also means that with our curses, I am using Frostbite, but I'm also using Elemental Weakness. Not only would that be like what you would want to run for a secondary curse on any elemental damage over time build anyway, but we get to double dip because Elemental Weakness is also making them take increased damage from our Sentinel burn. Now, on top of that, this is where Harmony of Purpose comes in. Now notice all the red text here means that the POB is broken and it's not actually applying it, but enemies in your link beams cannot apply elemental ailments. That's okay. That'll help for early game maybe a little bit until we have Purity of Elements online. Link targets and allies in your link beams have 5% to all maximum elemental resistances. So this is where this comes in, right? There's nothing in my config you can see here. So my max res on my Sentinel of Radiance here is 85%. And as long as he's linked, it'll be 90%, right? Now, enemies in your link beams have minus 20% to all elemental resistances. This is effectively Mastermind of Discord on Elementalists. Almost as good, right? But it's effectively Mastermind of Discord, but all resistances, once again. So we will have them exposed to both cold and fire, and then also shred an additional 20% cold and fire res through Harmony of Purpose. So there's a lot of really synergistic ways to scale damage on this build. So that's kind of how it'll work. Basically for mapping, and I did test this, by the way. Obviously, I can't clothesline things yet because the skill is not in the game, but what I did was I went into standard on a random character, I grabbed an Animate Guardian, and I went through like an Act 1 zone, and I just ran away from it. I did everything I could to try to break the link to see how clunky this would be in like a real world scenario, right? And surprisingly, I couldn't break the link. I literally could not break the link skill. If I just ran straight away, waited until he was hitting mobs, double, triple flame dash away, the monster, if you get far enough away, gets teleported on top of you before the link skill breaks. This is huge because this means that, one, you don't need to spend a link mastery, which effectively right here, it doubles. Links take twice as long as to break. It would double this. I was thinking this might be mandatory, however, was not mandatory. So I couldn't break the link at all. And the link takes 4 seconds, I believe, so to break. As soon as it started to do that little fade tether thing, if you have ever used a link skill before, you know what I'm talking about. As soon as it starts to like indicate that it might break, your minion immediately teleports directly on top of you. I couldn't break it even without convocation. So the only question now becomes, if you're like thinking like mapping through Bone Crypt or something that is like really claustrophobic and has lots of really tight corners, what about then? You know, would it feel bad then, or would the link break then? I don't know. And that's why I have convocation in the links. If I end up not needing convocation at all, that would be great, and it would save me a link, and I would be able to do a lot more. Because like I said, the bottleneck is actually skill gem sockets. However, I have it in the build just in case, so I'm not like caught with my pants down in the middle of Leaguestarter. However, that would be how you would get around that. If you run around a corner or whatever, the link's going to time out and the minion doesn't teleport to you because you're still close enough where it, you know, won't teleport, but you have broken line of sight, you convocate. So that's, yeah, that's that, I guess. And that's more or less how it'll work. So everywhere I ran, I couldn't break the link skill. And that's really important because it basically means with Frigid Bond active, you'll throw the link on your minion and just run everywhere and everything will get dotted. It really should be an incredibly smooth play style. And then the minion itself will have a giant dot on it. Like, this build should be incredibly smooth to play. I would be absolutely amazed if it didn't. Anyway, that's more or less everything that I'm scaling here. Just generic elemental damage, you know, life, getting spell suppression, all sorts of stuff like that. There's nothing like too shocking with the build. I think there's also something you could do with like a Infernal Legion Animate Guardian setup instead of a Cold Dot setup. And then another contingency plan I had is dropping Unwavering Crusade and taking Unwavering Faith. This gives you 5% increased recovery rate of life, mana, and ES for each aura. Running this actually gives a ton of flat life regen, where if you just use Rise of the Phoenix and click this node, you can easily sustain RF. It's like, you could do RF with this if you wanted. And if you are playing just RF and not using Cold Dot, Unwavering Crusade, which gives you a level 27 Anger, Hatred, and Wrath, doesn't really do a whole lot for just a burning build. So you could do something where you run like a, excuse me, you know, like a pseudo 6-link helmet for RF, and you have RF in the helmet, and then you have a 6-link body armor with your Infernal Legion Animate Guardian that's just cracked out of his mind, and then Radiant Crusade as well, having that minion burning, and then your minion cluster jewels, all of that will buff your Animate Guardian damage from his burning AoE and your Sentinel of Radiance, and then you have RF yourself. Yeah, like there's a lot of things I think you could do there, and this tree is more or less generic enough to apply to all of it. Like if you did RF, you could just do this instead, or just click out of this entirely if you wanted to and click somewhere else. But yeah, the build should be really, really smooth to play. I'm not really too concerned about anything. The only like minor thing is I saw some people saying that link skills feel bad because you accidentally target the wrong minion. This build should not really have that issue, simply because you will have 3 Holy Relic-esque auras following you around. I did the best I could to try to emulate and test this. I walked around with a Holy Relic and tried to get it as close to my Animate Guardian as possible, and then cast a link skill on it, and every single time, 100% of the time, I linked my Animate Guardian. It seems to be incredibly accurate. So I think it won't really be an issue. Like, Holy Relic tends to sit like directly on top of your character. Animate Guardian tends to sit pretty far away from your character. I didn't struggle with it at all. I think even if there were 3 of them, it wouldn't change too much. However, like I said, it's an assumption, so contingency plan. If that ends up being the case, you can drop this, which is a 20% more multiplier for your cold damage, and take this instead and try to run RF. However, I really don't think it'll be an issue. That would surprise me. I think that's mostly everything. I'm pretty excited to play the build. I think it'll be fun. I think it's very, very appropriate for me jumping into software. Now, defenses. What are the defenses? Well, the build for its auras, we're running Hatred, Anger, and Wrath via our Ascendancy. We're running Determination, Defiance Banner, Purity of Elements, and Vitality. I would say the most software thing I did here, because the build is so tight on sockets, I'm using a left-click Molten Shell, and anybody who knows me knows that I shit-talk this all the time. I couldn't get around it. I didn't have any other sockets to sacrifice. The only way to not have to do this is to manually cast both curses, which seems a little bit much when there's already a Divine Blessing you have to keep up. So, you know, again, it would, like I said before, it would be really nice if I didn't have to mess with Convocation, and maybe I end up going that Hungry Loop setup that I talked about before anyway in endgame to be able to give myself more sockets. Now the character is basically pseudo spell suppression capped, I would say. I believe it's 99% because I take spell suppression Lucky Mastery with like 94 or 95% spell suppression, which should put you at like 99 point whatever percent spell suppression. If I was playing hardcore, obviously I'd probably try to find a way to cap this, but since I'm in softcore, funcore this league, I was like, I don't know, we'll just see. It should be fine, right? And you have a few different options for your shield. I'm running this shield, spell sup, life, and I ran 2 max res just to see how it would change EHP values. You don't need to get this if you don't want to. You can even just completely run a Dawnbreaker instead. You can see that a Dawnbreaker with not perfect rolls, but like higher end rolls actually pretty much increases your EHP across the board, as long as you can get some of that spell suppression you're giving up elsewhere, you know, via like a anoint or something to make up for running it. But Dawnbreaker is definitely a very, very strong option to run in this build. You can also run a purely offensive build, a purely offensive shield for like plus to gems and increased spell damage. Another benefit of doing that would actually increase your energy shield more, so it would be easier to run Divine Blessing for your Eldritch Battery setup. Something you could do early game for sure, because, you know, like typically with Eldritch Battery, the reason you run it is not only to solve mana issues, but to be able to use Divine Blessing. You can see here that my mana cost of Malevolence is 608, and I have 666 ES. So like running a just ES base early on would be able to let you fit this in a lot easier. On that note, there's also stuff you can take like down here, like Righteous Decree. You could spend like 3 points here, and if we go back down, you can see, oh, it actually made it go up a little bit. Oh, I'm completely wrong on this. Never mind. I guess the math's not mathing there. There are ways though to decrease that amount or to also get more ES. One thing I'm also running on the build is something you typically run with EB builds, which is the regen ES per second when a rare unique enemy is nearby, simply because link skills do cost mana per second. However, I actually tested this on a Doomblast character, and what I noticed was that that Doomblast character that stacks, you know, reduced mana costs, Elrion Crafts, my link skill costs nothing. Even though it's a duration and it ticks for X amount of mana cost per second, my link skill costs literally nothing. So when all of my sockets here. I don't know why this has channeling skills. I need to fix this. I think there's too many different versions of this POB at this point. But basically, if we go in here, it should be this one right here. Because it's not a channeling skill. It's -7 to cost. So we get EB with a small life cost from the life mastery. And then we have Elrion crafts on all of them. It should just completely like throw the duration and cost issue of a link skill completely out the window. It shouldn't be much of an issue at all. But if it is, and anyway, I'll be running this craft because it really helps like to not bottom out. Like, you know, you use Divine Blessing and you have like 60 ES left, it'll just shoot right back up immediately. Aside from that, people say like most of the gear is pretty basic here. I'll go over the config real quick. Plus 300% to all resistances. I just put that in to simulate capped resistances. You can see here that a lot of this gear is very, very basic. It doesn't have anything. It just has the important stats. Like you're gonna want some main stat or like attribute on your amulet. You're gonna want some life on your amulet. You're gonna try to at least get +1 all or +1 cold on your amulet. And then the bench crafts that you'll want in these situations, right? Everything else is blank. And that's blank because it's assumed that resistances are gonna go there. Sorry, excuse me. Like I said, I'm really sick. So cap your resistances. You don't need me to do that for you. Even if you're using this as like a pseudo guide, cap your resistances. I'm not going to put resists on every single piece of gear I have. I make a trillion POBs for Leaguestarter. Creeping Frost deals 35% less damage. So Intuitive Link actually has a less damage modifier on it. So at gym level 21, they don't even have this in the POB. Link skills are so scuffed in this. Basically, it's like 37% less or something. However, via the Ascendancy and from all the link nodes, there is a ton of link buff effect. And POB doesn't know how to math that, which means I have no idea how to math that. I don't know how it works at all. So you should deal more damage than advertised. I have no idea how skill buff effect works with the less cost reduction of Intuitive Link. Just that it will very likely increase your damage further. I'd rather have a conservative estimate than a very over optimistic one. So just keep that in mind, I guess. That's why I have 35% less damage here. It's still, even with this, better than just a normal support gym by about 4%, like I said. Plus 20% chance to suppress spell damage. So this is literally just to actually cap it. It's not capped because I have a Quartz Flask, right? This is to just fully cap it for EHP reasons. So unless you have literally 100% suppression chance, POB will always calc your max hits and your EHP as if you have 0% spell suppression. So that config is just to make sure that it is always showing me an accurate display of my EHP levels. And then finally, plus 350 armor. This is kind of a conservative estimate, but it's a spitball. Again, red means that these affixes are not working with POB. And grants armor equal to 25% of your reserved mana to you and nearby allies. It's not working, so I had to manually add it in. You just take the amount of mana that's reserved, take 25% of that, and that's how much flat armor you get. Now finally, you have take 10% less damage. That's the Sentinel of Radiance buff. So one really, really interesting thing. You guys see how Sentinel of Radiance, the actual gym info says 10% of damage taken from hits is taken from minions life before you. This is interesting, right? Because the Ascendancy node itself also says 10% of damage from hits is taken from the Sentinel of Radiance life before you. I don't know if this is a redundancy thing on their end or not, but that being a node separate from the ability, and the ability also having this, means that this could potentially be 20%, which means you have Fortify, basically, which is pretty cool. Now, the last thing I'll go over, and someone asked me in my Discord, like, dude, what happens when your link skill times out? Because it's got a duration. Well, don't worry too much. Basically, Intuitive Link, if we go in here, my Intuitive Link has a duration of 23.5 seconds. You'll see here that for some reason GGG hates us, and Sentinel of Radiance is not a permanent minion. Very lame, GGG. Not cool. Super lame that you just gave me an extra button press for the sake of tedium. However, this minion lasts baseline 20 seconds. So when you factor in skill effect duration, so we have a duration mod here, skill effect duration. I don't know if skill effect duration will affect the Sentinel of Radiance or not. It should, but if it doesn't, then you would literally just click this node, which gives you minion duration. Basically, the point here is that the Sentinel of Radiance lasts longer than your link skill. So basically, you'll summon the Sentinel of Radiance, you'll link it. When the link skill wears off, summon the Sentinel of Radiance, you'll relink it. So basically, the way that you're going to be clearing maps is you'll summon the Sentinel of Radiance, you'll link it. For 30 seconds, you just run around, crackhead, have fun, do whatever, and everything dies. If you encounter a really tanky rare, you'll cold snap it, and you're fine. Use Vol Cold Snap whenever you want to. That's really how this will play. In single target, use Cold Snap off cooldown. Make sure you have your Arcanist brand on it to curse it, and keep your Divine Blessing Malevolence up, which also lasts for about 25 to 30 seconds. Should be really, really simple and straightforward. And that's really all I got for you guys. Like I said, every time people doubt me, every time I make myself the guinea pig to prove the point. So once again, I will be here with updates for the first few days, letting you guys know how the build goes. A few other points, like I said before, the build should actually be higher than advertised here, simply because Unwavering Crusade, basically these minions, depending on how much you invest in a minion life, are going to have somewhere between 65,000 and 85,000 life. When these time out, they explode, dealing their 100% of their life as damage. So that will be a ton of extra damage in single target situations. Like a 70,000+ base damage explosion is a ton. But a lot of these things are really hard to math out. I don't want to make assumptions, so there it is. That's basically how it'll work. One last thing to know is I do have Vol Cold Snap enabled right now. If you disable this, it's still 2.8 million. So very, very comfortable. I did take a bunch of level 100 characters off the HSSF ladder that were cold dot, both Elementalist, Trickster, and Occultist, and this did more DPS than all of them. With Vol Cold Snap off, the damage here is higher than those PoE ninjas that I imported, by the way. I didn't just look at PoE ninja DPS, I imported them. The damage here with Vol Cold Snap off is higher than those ones were with Cold Snap on. Obviously, you have to worry about minion survivability and bossing arenas and stuff like that, though, so that's something I'll figure out when I get there. But yeah, I'm really excited to league start this. It should be pretty fun, actually, and very, very unique. I haven't seen anybody do this anywhere, and once again, I'm using myself as the guinea pig. So a few things to note at the end. If you have any questions, try to leave them down below. I'll get to them as soon as I can. As you can see, it's midnight. League starts in a few hours from now. And that's really it. I didn't go over the tree too much. You guys are smart children. You guys can figure this out on your own. If you have questions about specific things, obviously ask and I will answer as soon as I can. And yeah, I believe that's everything. Friendly reminder, I have that privately going on. It is in Funcore this time around. This will be my first time playing it. So if you would like to come and join us, feel free. It is group bound. There's no economy. It's basically just sharing stuff. And then secondly, I'll be streaming, obviously. So if you want to see how this is going day one or whatever, feel free to stop by my stream. It's over on Physics everywhere, on every social media platform, but Physics on Twitch. Feel free to stop by, see how the build's going. And yeah, that's all I got. That's pretty much everything. Thanks a bunch. If you made it this far in the video, let me know. There's a lot of wiggle room with this build in terms of gearing and the tree. Should be pretty malleable, being able to see like things like Empowered Bond, if this is actually good or not and worth the point investment and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff I'm gonna have to actually play around with and test out. And maybe I don't like how the build feels at all and I reroll day one. Maybe Tahoe has chosen actually does exert war cries now and slams are playable again and I just completely reroll day one. I don't know. We'll see. GGG won't tell us, so we'll see. Anyway, I'm excited to play this. It should be pretty fun. I think a lot of people on my Discord are being baited into playing this with me, so we'll all be suffering together if it is complete dog shit. So, like I said before, Sentinel of Radiance by itself is so strong that even if the build does need to be tweaked into something a little bit different, this minion and this node by itself is so conducive to a league start situation that it will just hard carry you for a very, very long time. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Anyway, Links, as always, will be in the description below. Thanks a bunch for watching. Hope you guys have a good league start. See you around. Peace, guys. Stay safe.